Welcome to the season 3 of the Thought Leader Way Knowledge series, where I bring experts from industry and academia to share their perspectives on the future of marketing. In today's episode, we are exploring AI Unleashed, which is transforming marketing with Gen AI. So we will explore the incredible world of artificial intelligence and its transformative impact on marketing. I'm your host, Karthik Nagendra. Gen AI is revolutionizing the way we think about creativity, problem solving, and innovation. To guide us through this fascinating landscape, we have the privilege of hosting a distinguished guest, a senior professor from renowned Kellogg School of Management today. So my guest today is Professor Kevin McTigue. He is the Clinical Associate Professor of Marketing at Northwestern University's Kellogg School of Management. He is currently the Academic Director for Kellogg's Chief Digital Officer Program, and he's the co-director of Kellogg's Advertising and Marketing Communication Strategy Program as well. He has co-authored the Creative Brief Blueprint, contributed to Kellogg on branding and on marketing. Before his full-time appointment at Kellogg, Kevin led a strategy consulting practice for global digital agencies, Sapient Razorfish. So let's dive into here what perspectives he has to share on this topic today. Professor McTigue, welcome to the show. Really excited to have you here with us and talk about this exciting topic of Gen AI and marketing.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah. So, Professor, before we start off, can you give a quick overview or a broad overview on what generative AI encompasses at a higher level, and how does it fit into the broader landscape of a lot of these AI technologies which are now becoming mainstream in marketing?
Yeah, I think it's helpful to think about where Gen AI lives in the overall AI hierarchy. So you've got artificial intelligence, which is very, very broad. And then underneath artificial intelligence, we have machine learning. And I think machine learning, to start there, the easiest way to think about machine learning is it's simply the ability of a computer to make predictions based on data that it has ingested, rather than make decisions or predictions based on instructions it was given. And so if you think about what machine learning is broadly doing for marketers, I think you can boil it down to three things. I think the first thing that machine learning does is a segmentation tool, right? It can automatically take disparate customers, and based on their data characteristics, it can align them into segments, maybe different customers at different stages of the purchase journey. The second thing it does really well is make predictions. So based on the data that it's seen, it can say, I believe these customers are going to act in this certain way.
Yeah.
Okay. And then finally, the third thing it does is it can prescribe actions. It can say, for these customers, the next best action for us to take from a marketing tactical standpoint is this, right? And so if that's what machine learning does, basically ingest data, segment, predict, prescribe, I think we think of Gen AI as being just the next thing beyond that. It generates, right? So it does those things, and then it adds on the generation. So I think that's the easiest way to think about it. Gen AI has the same basic mechanisms as machine learning. It ingests a large corpus of data, and it could be public data or private data. And then based on that, users can then prompt it with a question or a task to get some kind of output.
Okay. So thanks for setting that context. So now I would request you to put on your teaching hat. And if you could elaborate on this from a 4-quadrant framework or approach standpoint for understanding how this Gen AI adds value in various contexts. So you spoke about segmentation, predictive analytics, action-based. So how does it pan out across these various contexts? And a follow-up to that would be, what are some key dimensions or factors that the CMO should consider while looking at this framework itself?
Sure. So I think the easiest way to think about it is, again, we're talking about Gen AI as it lives today, or roughly in this time frame, and it's we're relatively new to it, so this could expand. But the way we're thinking about it right now is that most of the research has shown it to be extremely helpful in making teams both more efficient, faster at their tasks, and also more effective. And so there's been a couple of research studies that came out this summer where one was a team at a big consulting firm where they took 800 people. They gave some the ability to use Gen AI tools and some not. And then they basically measured how long it took them to complete a certain amount of tasks. And then they had somebody else come in and grade the quality of those tasks. And consistently they find that the people that had access to the Gen AI tools were both faster and the outputs were slightly better. Okay, so better and faster, and that's held up in 2 consecutive studies now this summer. I think when we think about this, though, sometimes we immediately focus on this is going to replace jobs, and what we're seeing right now is that it's not so much a replacement for specific roles as it's an augmentation. Like it just helps us, right? We get to use it and it gets to make us faster rather than like replacing us right now. The way we talk about this then, based on what I said, is you can think about use cases on 2 axes. The top axis being, is this really just going to make you more efficient? Or is this going to make your output better? Is it going to make it more effective? And then the second axis is this an internal facing value add, or is it an external facing value add? So are we going for cost savings or growth? And I think that simplistic quadrant allows us to think about some of the most interesting use cases we're seeing right now. And I can talk through some of those use cases, the most predominant ones we're seeing. The first one is internally, and I think this is the most broadly adopted use case that I've seen of Gen AI on the corporate side, is as like an internal chatbot. And so if you think of yourself working at maybe like a large consulting firm, you could do a search across the database, the knowledge database of all the content we have on social media in Singapore. And that would give you a bunch of documents you'd read through. With this tool, you can just ask it, what are the top 10 best practices for social media marketing in Singapore, and give me the sources. And so again, this would have to be trained on your data, right? It's not going to be ChatGPT that's just out there. It would be trained on your data, and it would tell you based on these different documents, this is where we pulled it, this is what you need to know. So it answers the question rather than just giving you documentation. And so that use case, we're seeing that at like the big consulting firms. I've seen it at some big finance firms. I've heard mixed results. I've heard that some people think it's great. Some people say it's only as good as whoever put that content. So if they put bad content in about best social media practices in Singapore, you're going to get bad results back. But generally speaking, that seems to be a pretty good use case. And on the customer facing side, we're seeing the same type of tools used for like a customer self-service. So if you go to a website and you're trying to figure something out, you can dig around, you can search, or you can just ask the bot, and that might get you your answer a lot quicker. We're also seeing internal customer service teams that are armed with this. So based on what a customer says to us, we can quickly get to an optimal answer. And I think that's a very realistic short-term use case of just making our teams faster and getting information quicker. On top of that, there are some more internal efficiency things that we're seeing. There's a lot of like, make me a summary of this meeting, right? There's attachments that say, hey, after this meeting, just send me a summary of what we talked about, what are the next steps. You could say, make me a summary of this document. You can say, make me a summary of this 20-minute video that I don't want to listen to. You can probably say, unfortunately, make me a summary of this podcast with the key points, so I don't want to listen to the whole podcast. But no one's doing that for your podcast. So that's happening. And then you're seeing it. We also see a lot of fun use cases with content creation, right? So it can obviously can write emails, it can write content headlines, it can generate images, it can generate video. There's some new tools out where it can generate websites. We've seen it on the back end generate code. So there's a lot of like first generation. And in my, I guess where I think it's going is that ideally would plug this into your marketing automation system, right? So you're like customer data platform. You have other tools to figure out this is the next best thing to say to this customer. It's an email on a Tuesday morning at 10 a.m. And then the Gen AI tool just writes and delivers the email or creates the video ad that's going to be shown on YouTube or whatever it is. We're not quite there yet. I know there's companies that say they do it, and I've seen some examples of it, but I don't think we're 100% there yet, but I think we will get there. Some kind of auto generation of next best action.
So very interesting use cases, right? From emails to design to summarization to even getting trends. So a lot of marketeers are now grappling to figure out, there's also this deluge of sales tech and mark tech tools which have come in, and a lot of them seem to be having this AI incorporated into it. So if a CMO is having to consider any of these tools to be integrated into their marketing strategy, what are some factors or key dimensions that you think they should be evaluating before venturing into it?
I think the biggest thing is just knowing what the business problem is you're trying to solve. I mean, this goes back for decades, Karthik, right? We've been doing some kind of digitization of something since 99, 98, right? And I think that the mistakes I see when people come in and they say, I want to buy the Adobe stack. And I can't tell you how many times that we did a Adobe stack implementation and people would only use like 8% of it because they just didn't need it or didn't, you know what I mean? So I think the key thing is to go in like, what are you trying to solve? Like, where do you see inefficiencies in your process that this could take care of? Or where do you see potential effectiveness builds that you can get out of this? And then using the tools to solve a business problem and not just buy the shiny tool off the shelf.
Yeah, I think that's important. Otherwise, you are thinking that there are so many tools, so many interesting ones. So let me go and try out everything. And eventually you end up not using, like you said, even 78% of it.
And then a lot of times, and you've seen this too, like where you can implement these incredibly great tools, but if you don't do the back end, like change management to get people to use the tools, then they're just really expensive, unused tools. And so you've got to have like a clear business case for why you want the technology, and then you've got to make sure that the internal team is on board, right?
It's very
sees
true
the value, going to use it.
Yeah, that's very true, because one of the consulting engagements I was working on is a SaaS product, which is essentially helping organizations to manage their large accounts through a digital tool. And it had elements of AI incorporated into it. But the key challenge was that the mindset was such that people were used to using just Excel sheets and PowerPoints. So to even use the basic functionalities of this tool wasn't happening, leave alone AI giving you insights. So, like you rightly said, the change management was a huge piece that we were focusing on then. So I think that's very right. Understanding what you're trying to solve and whether you actually need it is the key thing to focus on that. So, Professor, you mentioned that we are in the first wave or first generation of this AI that we're looking at, and this is going to evolve and advance. With it will come in a lot more challenges. Some of the ethical considerations that need to be factored in mind before we probably bring in such solutions within the organizations. So what should CMOs be aware of while integrating this into their content marketing strategy?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things, right? The first is that we got to be really careful about, is the tool constrained to our environment, or is this a public tool, right? We've already had situations where somebody has entered in confidential company information into like a chat GPT, and then it's in chat GPT, right? It's out there on the world. And so you can buy these now that are walled off for your company. We got to be really careful that we're not putting information into a public domain, right? So the confidentiality and privacy thing is interesting. With some of the generative art and content, there's still a lot of concerns about where did it come from?
Yeah.
Right? Like whose text did it learn from? Whose images were used to assemble mine? We're seeing lots of lawsuits about that. There's also the problem of accuracy.
Yeah.
It can still hallucinate. It's better than it was 9 months ago. It will get better, but it can still give fake answers.
Yeah.
Right. So we have to know that, and we have to be able to double check it. And we can't just take everything it says as face value. I mean, one of the big things too is it's learning, right? From basically all the data we give it. If the data we give it is biased, because of how people have acted in the past, the machine will be biased. It doesn't make its own good decisions, right? And so we have to be really careful about what data we're feeding into it, because the data we feed into it could be biased, and it's going to make biased decisions. And there's all sorts of like tools that they're using now to kind of check for bias and check for things like this, but that can be a problem. The next thing is that this right now it uses a lot of like electricity, right? It's a big suck on electricity, and so it's not like the most eco-friendly thing we've got out there, and that's a concern. And the last thing, Karthik, and this surprised me as I'm like sitting in conferences and listening to this. We don't know exactly how it works. Which is crazy, right?
True.
Even the people building it, they're like, yeah, it's great, but we don't know exactly how it works. I'm like, well, that's kind of scary, right?
I think I remember watching this interview of Sundar itself, where they were talking about how they are going about building this, and in fact, some of things, the code that they built in, and later it's kind of learned something on its own and given responses which they don't even know how it worked. So that's very true, and it's quite scary also.
Yes.
At the same time. But the point that you spoke about, especially from the electricity standpoint, and being heavy on the planet, so I think that will be also an interesting factor to figure out how do you offset that, right? So on one side, it is definitely optimizing things and fast tracking a lot of stuff, but at the same time, it's on the flip side, this is what it is, and I think a lot of them are not giving it that much of importance at this stage, and I'm sure but
Karthik, we're going to have 25 vendors that do this, right? And I think that we're going to see them start to differentiate on that point, right? Somebody's machine, Gen AI, is going to be the most eco-friendly, and that's going to be, their point of difference, because beyond that, there's not going to be a lot of differences, I don't think, between the tools once everyone gets up and running.
True. One aspect on marketing, which is a lot more prevalent right now, is from a content creation standpoint itself. Right, and especially the B2B companies or B2B tech companies which are there, they look at creating a lot of these thought leadership content pieces using they would either use their in-house experts, or earlier they used to outsource it to writing experts externally. But now with more and more of these tools coming in, there is that from a marketer standpoint, saying, okay, do I really need to hire a content writer to do this? Why not just take this tool and I can start putting out content out there much faster? How do you think that impacting brands from those who want to really establish thought leadership in their domain on technology?
It's interesting. I mean, that is one of the areas where I do think jobs will be impacted. If you had 20 people writing content for your B2B company, you might not need 20 people writing content for your B2B company, right? So I think it's really good at, especially like long B2B content, right? Where you've got all this documentation, and you can take your documentation and say, I need you to write it in this tone of voice. And I mean, if you've done this B2B content work, you know how hard it is to have a consistent voice across all of your thought leadership, across your website. you can train the machine to say, no, this is the voice of our company, write it in this style of voice, right? And so I think right now it's really, really crucial that we've got good people that can check this and be the editor of but it's basically like your first draft writer. It does a great job with first drafts.
Yeah.
Right. And so that is going to be an area where I think there are going to be some real efficiencies if you're writing a lot of content. But the other thing is, I'm worried that if everyone's just doing this, right,
Correct.
then we're going to get to this point where it's like, this is obviously all machine generated.
Yeah.
Maybe it's interesting, maybe it's not interesting. Maybe I just have my Gen AI just summarize it for me because I don't even want to read your website anymore, your thought leadership piece. I don't know. It could get into this weird circle where you're just like one Gen AI is talking to the other.
Yeah. I remember seeing a cartoon which was out there where you had two office setups. One is the seller and one is the buyer. And one is saying, I've built this tool which can draft this email, summarize these things, and send it out to the client. And then on the client side, there's the other bunch who are sitting there saying, so I have a AI bot which kind of reads this and then replies as well. So then it's machine to machine conversations is happening, and what happens to the conversation?
Just let me know when we bought it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So my last question, Prof, is with the way this is evolving, what are some trends that you foresee as this AI evolves moving forward, and the impact on marketing?
I think we're going to quickly get to the point, based on some things we already had, right? Plus this, where your marketing experience should be incredibly personalized, no matter what you're buying, right? And so you should be seeing things you think you're going to like, right? You should be getting emails when you want to read them at the right length and everything else. That if you see a commercial, it should be a commercial for things that you like to see. It should be a commercial that you like to watch.
Yeah.
And so in theory, we just get better, right? We have the ability to be much more personalized in everything we do for our customers to make the experience that much better for our customers. And so I think what's going to happen is, as more firms adopt these tools to become more personalized in a good way, not a creepy way, we're going to see this. We already hear like, oh, I wanted the experience to be as easy as it is shopping on Amazon or using Netflix or whatever, right? You hear that already. I think what's going to happen is a broad bunch of companies across industries are going to move forward and have really user-friendly experiences. And that's going to set a new bar of expectations for like what is normal. And I think normal is going to move up to a higher level. And I think firms that maybe think that they are their industry, it's not going to happen to their industry, or they're in this B2B niche and that's not going to, I think those are the firms that are in trouble. I think you just got to pay attention to what everyone else is doing and where consumer expectations or customer expectations are going to be set, and make sure we're keeping up, right? And it's not about chasing the fancy tool. It's literally about, what does my customer expect? What kind of experience do they expect? And how do I best deliver that? And if it's through the tools, great. But I see that moving forward, and I see that leaving some firms behind.
Yeah. So I think that's very nicely summarized. The key insight is, you need to be a lot more agile. You need to keep your eyes and ears open, see what's happening out there. Have your use cases in place so that you're able to map the right tool and the right framework for that. And while the future may seem scary for a bit, it's also quite exciting to see how it's going to take the bar up with respect to what you produce out there.
It is. I mean, it's been that way for the last 25 years in marketing, right? It's always been changing so much constantly, but it also makes it fun. Sometimes I wish I taught like economics and it never changed, but
yeah. Absolutely. So thanks a lot, Professor. It was wonderful speaking to you. Thanks for sharing these insights, and let's see what the future holds for us.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Professor. Have a good day.
Thanks.